Hello everyone. This is going to be a video on how to install Apache Airflow and get it up and running and get your first DAG moving on an Ubuntu environment. Apache Airflow, for those of you who do not know, is a really neat tool that was originally designed to work with ETL pipelines and loading of data, but it's really powerful and very flexible. Unfortunately, I'm a little bit of a newcomer, and the documentation, while very thorough, is not super friendly from a beginner perspective. So it took me a little bit longer than I'd like to get it up and running, and there wasn't a lot of video resources, so I figured that this might be helpful to somebody. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do everything on a VM here. This is just standard Ubuntu Server. Uh, This is just the latest long-term release. This can be pretty much done on Windows as well, almost the same way, except for switch your pip commands with pip3 and all that good stuff. So I'm just going to log in. Alright, we're in. So first thing we're going to have to make sure we have is pip3. Of course, pip3 is not found. We have to install it, so sudo apt install python 3-pip. Now, the documentation tells you to go ahead and just pip install. If you do that, you're going to get, of course, on Ubuntu, the Python 2.7 version, which is perfectly functional unless you want to use Python 3 code in your DAGs and import Python 3 modules. So that was one really big hurdle. Please make sure you're installing this as a Python 3 package, not a Python 2 package. Otherwise, you're going to give yourself a big ol' headache. So we're going to go ahead and wait for that to install, and I'll be back when that's done. No need to watch progress bar. Okay, pip3 is all installed. Next thing I would do if this was not a completely fresh environment would be I would go ahead and uninstall Gunicorn. Gunicorn is the web server that Apache Airflow uses to serve the Flask application that kind of gives you the GUI. And it has some issues if you're using the wrong version or there's a version mismatch. It can cause some problems. It'll give you configuration errors. So best thing to do is just you can go ahead and do a pip3 list, and that'll give you all your installed Python packages or anything involving pip. And you'd see a Gunicorn there if there was one installed. This isn't an issue for me because this is a brand new VM, but I would double check if you are repurposing this or if you're going to actually be using this as the same web server as something else. Let's say you've got like another Flask application or you've got a Django application or Pyramid, something you're hosting on here. First of all, I would avoid that if possible, just because it's a little more resource intensive than that. Second of all, I would definitely utilize virtual environments. Virtual environments work well with Apache Airflow, I'm told. I have not messed with it, but there's a ton of good documentation out there about it. But let's assume we don't have to deal with that, and let's go ahead and install. First thing you should always do when you're installing Airflow is you should do it as super user, because it's going to edit your aliases and it's going to associate the Airflow command with the word Airflow in your terminal. I've done it before without using sudo, but it can cause problems, so I would recommend that. So sudo pip3 install Apache Airflow. Whatever you do not just install Airflow. If you just install Airflow, you will probably actually get nothing back. If you do that in a Python 2.7 environment, you may or may not, depending on the time of day, get the beta version of Airflow back, which you definitely don't want to do. So it's going to go ahead and install dependencies. As you can see, it's installing the appropriate version of Gunicorn. And it's going to install a lot of other stuff. It's going to install Flask, which is the Flask which will help render the website that the GUI lives on. It's going to install NumPy, it's going to install SQL Alchemy, it's going to install a lot of stuff. There's a lot of dependencies that go with it. And there's a lot of stuff that it's out of the box really able to do with Celery and stuff like that. As you can see, it's a big old list of dependencies to install there. And we'll be back when it's done. Okay, all of our dependencies are installed, and let's open up that really cool GUI, and let's see what we can do, and let's design some DAGs, and let's get some tasks going, and let's look at our charts. No, not exactly. There's a couple additional steps that you need to do. First and foremost is the back end of Airflow needs a database to talk to. Right? So that's how it coordinates the service workers, that's how it coordinates statistics and gives you all those cool charts and tracks all of your data. So you have to set it up. So that's pretty easy to do. So all you have to do is type Airflow, init db. It's going to go ahead and set up the SQLite database. Now, the SQLite database by itself is just something to really get you started. It's not a very powerful tool. SQLite is very performant. It's really awesome for application databases for embedded stuff like this. However, it's not synchronous. It's not able to make multiple connections at the same time. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many workers you load up, it's only still going to be able to do it sequentially, one at a time, right? So if you're looking for more than one action to be performed at any one given time, or you're looking for a little bit of distributed work, you're going to need to look at something like Postgres or MySQL, and then an additional option for distributed computing, like maybe Celery. But our database is all set up. So let's go ahead and run the web server. And to run the web server and get your GUI up and running, it's just a simple Airflow web server. And by default, this runs on port 8080. However, you can manually specify what port you want it to run on with the P flag. So -P for the P flag for port, and then 8080. And there we go. We are up and running. One of the things that says is filling up the DAG bag. So this is at the point where it'll try to import any custom DAGs you've written in your DAG folder, and of course that folder name right there is the DAG bag. That is where it's looking for the DAGs. So if we go ahead and open up our favorite browser and navigate to the local IP address and then colon for to specify the port 8080, you get your GUI. Now you're going to look at these operators and you're going to be like, okay, well let's just go ahead and run one manually, right? Like this example bash operator. Let's go ahead and hit the trigger DAG button, that play button. That's really intuitive, right? Okay, all right, yeah, no, it's running. And you're going to sit there and you're going to click that refresh button, or you're going to go ahead and refresh your browser, and you're going to sit there and you're going to stare at it, and that one will never go away. The reason that one will never go away is we've only started part of Airflow, right? There's a bunch of different pieces to Airflow. The web server is just one big piece. The other is the scheduler. We haven't started the scheduler at all. So what we need to do is go ahead and start it. Well, how do we start the scheduler when we have, I mean, we can't really do anything, right? When the web server is running. Well, we have to run the web server as a daemon. So let's go ahead and kill the web server. And if you try to do anything, of course, in your browser, you're going to get an error. So let's go ahead and run the web server again. But this time, let's run it with a different flag. Let's not worry about that -P. Instead, we're going to do a -D for daemon. That tells Ubuntu we're going to run this in the background. We still want to be able to do other things with our terminal. So we're going to go ahead and run that. And it's going to start doing its thing where it, shows you the Airflow logo, and then it's going to kick you out into a regular terminal. But you'll notice the web server is running, and it's running well. It's not having any problems. So next thing we need to do is start up the scheduler. So let's go ahead and fire that up, and we're going to do it the same way as a daemon. So let's go ahead and type Airflow. and then scheduler. And then we're going to run this as -d2. And this has a lot of arguments. You can specify the number of schedulers you want. You can specify concurrent workloads and all that stuff. But we're going to go ahead and refresh, and we're going to see, oh, okay, all right, our scheduler's running, right? Yeah, it's running. But we're still not doing anything. It's still running. It's going to run forever. And by the way, this is not a complicated DAG. This is I'm going to print something in the terminal or the command prompt, and then I'm going to go ahead and exit, or I'm going to wait for a few seconds, or I'm going to do some random number stuff. This is not complicated. So even though you've triggered a DAG manually, even though it has a schedule, even though you're sitting here waiting for it to do something, you have to turn it on before it'll do anything. So I went ahead and turned it on, and now it will do something. So notice it's done two things. It's triggered itself based on its schedule, right? Because it thinks, oh, I should have run by now, so I'm going to run. And then it's counting my manual trigger. And so you can see we've already had a success here. So you can go ahead and take a look at this, and you can get a log, and you can see the graph here. There's a ton of cool stuff, and this is visually a very, very impressive piece of software, and I highly recommend getting to know it a little bit better. But just a quick tip here, and this was pretty quick and dirty. If you're trying to see what DAG is running at what time, you can do it in the GUI, right? You can go ahead and go to your jobs and see exactly what's running. But this isn't a very intuitive way of doing it. You can do it, when you have access to the browser, but maybe you don't. Maybe you're just SSH'd in, and you're like, man, something's hitting my server really hard, and I'm having some problems, and I'm wondering why. You can always just fire up good old HTOP and see what's running. And what I like to do is I like to do a filter, and we can go ahead and filter based on Airflow, and we can see exactly what's running. And let's just go ahead and pretend we're going to run this DAG one more time. I'll trigger it manually on my screen here. You're going to be able to see it actually doing work. And if you get a tree view as well, you can see all the workers and sub-workers. It's pretty cool. It gives you a nice little view into what's happening. So I hope that was helpful. If that worked out for everybody, I might do another video explaining how I set up a really simple, basic DAG with multiple tasks and specify the order of operations. And I'm going to be doing it in Python. But obviously, there's a number of operators you can use. There's Bash, there's database operators, there's controller stuff for Kubernetes and Docker and AWS modules, and there's all kinds of neat stuff that Airflow can do that's probably way above my head. But if you guys have any interest in that, let me know, and I'll go ahead and start working on it. Thank you very much.